So I just got back from taking a trip and I ended up going on a drive through a lot of back roads. There wasn't a lot of main highways on the journey that I took. And I saw all kinds of incredible things on this drive, some of which were pretty hilarious. Maybe I've seen one too many Twilight Zones or X-Files episodes back in my younger years, but I kind of default to plot lines that could have been episodes in those series. And I was driving past this gas station that had a sign up on it, and it just said hot and crispy, which was written over or laid over the image of a chicken. That's all it said. It didn't say anything about chicken. It just said hot and crispy, picture of a chicken, and everybody who looks at it, every human being who looks at it knows what that means. Oh, they have fried chicken there. But I instantly defaulted to a Black Mirror episode where it would be a picture of a human being with hot and crispy laid on top of it, and all the other creatures who lived in this realm, or the other predator that was in this realm, would see that sign and say, oh, they have fried humans in this gas station, let's stop. It really just underscores the alien nature of human, quote-unquote, intelligence. It's a predator intelligence that just does not seem to belong in this place, whatever it is. Or maybe that's precisely why it belongs in this place, because of what it is. There's something alien about it that doesn't fit. And then this was reinforced a little bit later in the trip when I pulled up at a stoplight, and on my right was this giant semi-truck. It was huge, about 3 times the length of my normal size car, maybe even more. And it was just loaded with dead trees, just a ton of logs, I guess we could call them. But what it really is a dead tree, right? And there was probably 100 dead trees just piled up on the back of this huge semi that was being taken somewhere. And I really had this alien idea reinforced in that moment. Like, man, think about what that is, what that represents. If we were in nature, in the actual real world, not this civilization, not this society that exists within the civilization, everything that's been laid on top of the land via concrete and other substances that were first extracted from the earth in the first place. Whoever came up with that, I don't know how they did it. Maybe with some help from other intelligences that knew these kind of things. But in any event, if you were out in the wild, sure, you might cut down a few trees here and there. If you watch survivalists do this, or somebody who utilizes primitive technology in that way, sure, they will cut down a few trees for the scaffolding of the shelter that they're going to build, but that's a one-time thing. You use a few trees for your permanent shelter. You don't go in excess of that, and in that way there is a balance maintained with what you are taking from the land. What I witnessed was a representation of mass deforestation, right? Where the alien human, quote unquote, intelligence just goes in and takes out an entire forest, a section of it, and then piles it onto this massive vehicle and transports it around the world, turning it into whatever they turn those logs into. Paper, well, probably not much anymore, right? What do they even use logs for at this point, right? We're not going to have paper in 5-10 years, probably. I suppose this is the lumber industry where it gets its supplies, but the trees were no different than those little chickens that were plastered up on the side of that gas station convenience store. You know, it was this sentient creature that doesn't have a chance when dealing with our predator intelligence. And I lump myself in with it, even though I have no allegiance to it, and in many ways I don't feel any a part of it, but I'm in one of the bodies that they say is a human, and I'm thinking in the intelligence that is said to be human. I'm speaking the language that is said to be human. I don't feel that I'm in any way a part of it, like I said, but here I am, right? What do I do with this conundrum that I find myself in? And not too long after that, I passed a billboard that said, in bright neon letters with this bright background, it just said, "Jesus saves." And I just kind of chuckled to myself after what I had witnessed, like, yeah, we need to be saved. Look at what we're doing. Like, it's no wonder that these are put up for everyone to see, like a reminder, hey, you're not exactly living the right way here, buddy. You could probably use some help. And, of course, their version of the man they call Jesus is much different from the thing that could actually save you or help you deal with this situation. But that's neither here nor there. I don't want to discuss that right now. Rather, I wanted to go in a different direction and just talk a little bit about how you deal with being here. Well, what can you do? I was thinking about this as I was driving. Now, this might not be true objectively, but subjectively for me, the best way that I have found to deal with the situation that I am in is to focus on myself and my own mind and the way that it interacts with the world in all the ways that it does so. Now, that was a very vague, convoluted sentence that really doesn't mean anything when you break it down and think about it. So let me explain it in a way that it will make sense. There are many different ways to go about this. One example that will eventually lead to a point, I promise, is recently I've been watching videos on YouTube of road rage. All different kinds of dash cam footage from people in mostly America, but all over the world, really, who are recording everything that happens while they're driving with a video camera, and then they save it, and someone splices it all together and uploads it to YouTube. So you just have example after example after example of the worst of humanity being displayed to you. And it's not bad in the sense of what is happening, right? Sometimes accidents are unavoidable and people just get in each other's way. Some people aren't paying attention. Some people are inconsiderate. Some people are in a rush to go nowhere. You know, it's all over the place, and these little interactions happen, fender benders, and people legitimately get furious with each other. And I myself have had issues with becoming infuriated when I'm driving at someone's lack of consideration on display, right? Or just not knowing the unwritten rules of the road, right? They just don't have enough experience to know what they're supposed to do in given situations. And they kind of just mess with the efficiency of travel in that way, which is something that always irritates me. And it was so interesting what I noticed after watching these videos just a little bit every night, like 10 minutes. Eventually, I started to think, wow, is this what I look and feel like when I'm getting mad on the road? If so, that's ridiculous. You know, I had this epiphany moment where I was observing other people getting mad at each other, getting in close calls, what could have been accidents, and just, you could tell the energy of the situation was so draining on everyone involved, no matter what it was. And I'm sitting there after I don't even know how many videos I watched along these lines over the past couple months. But eventually, I have that aha moment and I say, wow, That's what I'm doing to myself. What am I thinking? Unbelievable. And if you really think about what I did there, I just used technology to do what my mind is already capable of. This was an external example of something being recorded by a camera, me playing it back, watching the scenes, and seeing myself in the scenes from time to time, and going, wow, that's kind of cringe. I can't believe I was actually doing that at one point in my life. But of course, we have the very same ability with our memory. It's a inbuilt camcorder, an inbuilt video recorder. Everything that our eyes see is recorded, and we are capable of retrieving it and playing it back in the same way that you access a file on your computer to play later. Something that you have downloaded there. So very interesting how man-made technology of the external world mirrors and mimics the natural technology that is the human body. But we all have the ability to do what I did externally, internally. This could loosely be described as introspection. Observing yourself in the world, playing back interactions that you have with people, playing back events, on and on it goes. And in sports, there's a similar thing that transpires where whatever sport it is, you play a game and everyone watches the film together, and the coach will be up there pointing out what went right, what went wrong, what we can improve on, etc. That's the same process that's going on in your mind. Again, an external example of it. You have this recording of an event that occurred, your participation in this game, and then you can revisit it after the fact and see what was good about it and what needed to be improved. And we can do this with our own interactions, but of course the problem is that a recording is objective and doesn't lie. Like your mind is capable of lying, or that's a harsh word for it, right? Sometimes we have different interpretations of events because of all the different influences and perspectives that each person is bringing to their recording of a particular sequence of events, right? So there is a subjectivity interjected into it via the human mind that isn't present with the external recording technologies. But it's the same process, and part of developing your own self-awareness, becoming a better human being, is using that ability to replay events and critique yourself. See what you could have done better, see what you did good, and just move on from there. Do better the next time that you experience whatever it is. We do this with work, we do it with relationships. There's no limits to what we can use this ability to examine. Well, I guess the only limit is what we can see. What we are capable of recording, which is everything. We even do it when our eyes are closed, though, when we dream, right? And we can come back into the waking world and remember those dreams and do the same thing, play them back. But that kind of really gets at the problem, the subjectivity of it, because when you're in your dreams, you don't have perfect recall of what is going on because it's partially your subconscious storage drive that is being accessed, and you don't fully recall that being stored in the first place. That's why it's called subconscious, right? So that makes it very difficult to remember everything when you're awake. And in the same way, that happens in our waking interactions that are recorded, where all kinds of things are being downloaded by our sensory decoding system in many different dimensions, and we only remember a very specific bandwidth of all those frequencies. A lot of people use this ability in a crippling way that inhibits progress in the sense of using this ability to rehash and replay the same events over and over and over again in a way that was traumatic. And you relive that trauma over and over and over again. You replay an event in the same way a bunch of times, and it paralyzes you in a certain way. And sometimes rightfully so. We have these very traumatic things that happen to us on this planet, wherever we are, and that trauma lasts. It carries with us, and it's so impactful that we really have trouble not replaying it. And then that's where you get into people that have issues because their mind, especially if the trauma happened when they were young, created a barrier to accessing that trauma to protect itself. And so it's buried in there, still impacting you, but then you're replaying the event in a way that's not objectively true, totally, because it protects you. And then this happens vice versa, in the exact opposite way, where you can replay an event in a subjective way that puts you in the best possible light, that makes you seem like you really weren't as bad as you were in a certain interaction. And you tell yourself the same story over and over again. And this is how grudges are formed, right? Oh, that person did this to me. I know they did because I've just been replaying what they did to me over and over and over again. I can't forget what they did to me. But that's a product of whatever is going on in this world where no one wants to accept responsibility for anything that's ever happened, right? It's always somebody else that is responsible. And so we create these stories that put the blame on anybody but us. And that is what I'm talking about as it relates to the thing that you can do in this place. It's use this ability in a way where you examine yourself in an honest and least subjective way possible. Really work at getting to what objectively happened. And the only way you can do that is if you fully let go of any kind of control over what you did in a given situation, right? Now, sure, you can have your influences that led you to do whatever that was and helped it along, but ultimately you have to accept responsibility for it. And I'm referring specifically there to the things where you're not being honest with yourself. I'm not referring to the traumatic things like what can happen to a child that was no fault of their own at all, right? That's why I delineated between the two different kinds of things that you tell yourself a story about. One is to make yourself look better so you accept no responsibility. One is to protect yourself from severe trauma that would otherwise cripple you and you wouldn't even be able to go out in the world and interact because it's that traumatic of an event. And sometimes when you do this and you really focus on this process, you'll have epiphanies that don't have anything to do with anything that I've described so far. You'll just realize that you've been replaying an event and it's stuck in your memory for a very specific reason. And you, based on your interpretation of your life up until that point, have a very different idea of why you remember that. It's pretty cool, actually. I'll give you an example. When I was a junior in high school, so around 17 years old, I had grown up my whole life playing soccer, or football for those of you in the rest of the world. I grew up my whole life playing with kids that were older than me. And that year that I was a junior, I was playing with seniors that I had, like I said, played with since I was 10, 11 years old. So we knew each other really well. We were friends on and off the pitch, just as close as you can get to people at that age. And we go into the state tournament missing our team captain, who was a senior, because those of you familiar with the game, he had got a second yellow card in the tournament the game prior, and so that was the equivalent of a red card, and he was suspended for the next game. And he was the heart and soul of our team. He made it go, so it was a big loss, and he had to watch the game from outside the stand. So they wouldn't even let him in the game, like to be there. So every now and then I would see him standing way off in the distance and not even allowed to be out there. It was a really unfortunate situation. So long story short, this game goes to extra time and then penalties. We end up losing in penalties. And I replayed this game my whole life for some reason. I don't know why. I had plenty more losses after that. I had more competitive, amazing wins in the future after that. Like, so many better or worse memories. And for some reason, this one just stuck with me and I couldn't forget it. And I always had this associated regret with the memory because when we went to extra time, I had this idea after the fact, I should have said something to everyone and made them more aware of the situation that we were in and the duty that we had given that situation. What I mean by that is I always had this regret that I should have spoken up and said, hey guys, I know we're all tired, but you know that if he was on the field with us right now, he'd still be working harder than anybody out here, our team and their team included. And yeah, we're missing him right now, but for that reason, we owe it to him to step it up and win this game so he doesn't go out as a senior without even getting to play in his last game. And I always had this regret for not saying that. I didn't say that. I was too tired. I didn't want to say anything. I just wanted to focus on the game, right? You're just too in the moment sometimes to think to do that. And it's one of those things you see in hindsight. Oh, I should have done that. And I just had this little splinter in my mind that would constantly remember that once every 3-4 years since it happened, which was a long time ago now, over 20 years. So this is partially an Al Bundy moment for those of you who are familiar with that. This is a 4-touchdown Polk High story, baby. I'm not quite selling women's shoes yet, but don't rule that out. We could be on our way there. But anyway, I had that splinter in my mind. It just wouldn't go away. I would just randomly remember it. And for the longest time, I thought it was just this random regret that you have about a moment where you lose a game you hoped you had won. And we all have moments like these. It doesn't have to be sports. The job you didn't get, the girl or guy that slipped through your fingers, whatever it is, right? Life has its own way and its own ideas about these things. And then you just have that little splinter in your mind about these little situations and they kind of just linger with you and you play them back. Like I said, you have your recording of it through your eyes that gets stored in your hard drive and you access it randomly from time to time for whatever reason. Well, what I'm getting at is a lot of the time that it's accessed is to show you something, to teach you a lesson. You experienced it so that it could help you with something later. And I didn't know what to do with this particular rendering that I had of this situation, my subjective interpretation of it. Why is it this quasi-regret that I have with this memory? And then I finally had the epiphany moment when I replayed it again in a different context. Like, well, hold on a second. What if this isn't something that I regret? What if this is an example of something that's trying to teach me a lesson? Okay, so let's re-examine, let's replay this and think of how it could apply to your life now. And then I finally realized what it was all about. It's, you're remembering this event because it's an example of a time when you wish you had been brave enough to speak out and say what needed to be said for all the people that weren't able to speak because they couldn't. Literally, they were banned from speaking, and you had the ability to do it, and you didn't do it. And that's why you have this regret, because one of your best friends wasn't able to experience his last game, and you let him down in that way, not speaking when you had the chance to. Now, of course, even if I had said something, maybe we still lose anyway, right? It's not about win, loss, or changing the outcome in any way. It's about understanding why I still remember it. And those of you who have a very fast processing speed have already beat me to my conclusion. You already know where I'm going with this. Which is that splinter in my mind was waiting to come back and remind me, hey, don't miss another chance to speak out for those who are not able to do so themselves.